Our movie's events are set in 1250 BC during the Late Bronze Age. We had the Greeks clashing with Thessaly's army. King Agamemnon, ruler of Mycenae, rolls up to meet Thessaly's king, Triopas, one of Greece's last kingdoms. Agamemnon used to rule Mycenae, but now he's taken over most of Greece, bringing them under his command to wage war. He comes with his army to Thessaly, asking the king to surrender so he can take over the kingdom. Triopas ain't having it, though. He challenges Agamemnon to a face-off, suggesting a duel between the top fighters from each army. Agamemnon is down for it, and Triopas calls out for his best warriors. A giant warrior steps up, ready to throw down. Agamemnon then calls for the mightiest warrior in all of Greece, known as Achilles the Great. But Achilles wasn't on the battlefield, so Agamemnon sent a kid to fetch him from the camp. The kid rides his horse and finds Achilles still sleeping. He wakes him up and tells him the king is waiting. Achilles asks what's up, so the kid informs him about the fight. He gears up, takes his sword, and rides out. The kid spills the beans about Achilles being the son of a god, immortal and unbeatable. Achilles laughed and told him that if he weren't dying, he wouldn't bother with armor and would just go fight. The kid warns him that Thessaly's warrior is a beast, the biggest warrior he's ever seen. Achilles tells the boy not to fear anyone and that history won't remember him if he chickens out. He walks away, leaving the kid in amazement. Now it's showtime. Agamemnon is furious with Achilles, saying he should behead him for his negligence, but Achilles challenges him to fight his own battle. The advisor convinces Achilles, pointing out that every soldier in front of them has a family. If Achilles kills one man, he can spare the rest. Achilles returns ready to fight, and Agamemnon reluctantly agrees. Achilles tells him, "Next time, fight your own battles without your army." He charges towards the enemy's warrior, who throws a spear, but Achilles deflects it with his shield and keeps running. The warrior readies his sword, ready to kill Achilles, who is much shorter. But Achilles jumps, plunging his sword into the warrior's neck, and stands there victorious. He calls out for anyone else willing to fight him, but nobody shows up or says a word. King Triopas is amazed at Achilles' strength and skills. He asks for Achilles' name. Achilles replies to him, and Triopas says he'll remember it forever. Triopas gives him the kingdom's scepter to hand it over to his king according to the agreement, but Achilles refuses, saying he has no king. Later, we see a big celebration hosted by Menelaus, the king of Sparta. He invites Troy's princes, Hector, the mightiest of their warriors, and his little brother Paris. They make a peace treaty with Menelaus, who is Agamemnon's brother. After the feast, we find the king enjoying his time, drinking and cavorting with the ladies. His queen, Helen, is sitting there, bored and annoyed. Paris sneaks into her chamber, revealing his deep love for her. However, Helen is fearful of her husband, Menelaus, and Paris proposes that they run away together. But Paris is caught by Hector, who realizes the gravity of the situation. Hector confronts Paris, telling him he knows about his affair with the king's wife. He warns Paris that the kingdom's interests are more important than his love for Helen. Hector threatens to cut off Paris's head if he jeopardizes the peace treaty with Menelaus, who, by the way, is Agamemnon's brother and could destroy their kingdom. Hector tells Paris to get ready because they're sailing to Troy, and he better not mess things up. So the next day, as they're cruising on the ship, Paris asking his brother Hector if he loves him and if he would protect him from anything, and Hector spills that the last time he dropped that line, he stole their old man's horse. Hector asks him what kind of mess he's in this time, so Paris asks Hector to go down with him to the ship's belly, and there he sees Helen hiding after she ran away with Paris. At the same time, Menelaus discovers Helen's disappearance, searches everywhere, chokes her maid to spill the beans about her whereabouts, and finds out she ran away with the Trojans. So Menelaus goes to his brother Agamemnon and tells him he's been fighting for him his whole life. All the glory was for him. And now for the first time, he's asking him to fight for his honor, and then he asks him to fight alongside him to bring back his honor. Agamemnon says to his brother that his honor is his honor too, and the honor of all the Greeks, promising him that this will be the greatest war in history. Later on the ship, Prince Hector orders the sailors to turn back to Sparta, but Paris tells him if he hands over Helen to Menelaus, he'll surrender himself too. Hector warns Paris that if Menelaus catches a glimpse of him, he'll lose his head. But Paris, not afraid, claims he loves Helen so much he could die for her. Hector scoffs, saying Paris doesn't even know the meaning of love, but Paris sticks to his guns. Hector gets mad and orders the sailors to change course back to Troy. Later on, we see Agamemnon in one of his palaces in Greece planning an attack on Troy. The advisor warns him about Troy's strength, its impenetrable fortress that never fell in any invasion, even if besieged for 10 years. However, Agamemnon, greedy and obsessed with Troy, already had Troy on his mind, saying it was time to bring the mighty warriors and assemble the largest possible army, starting a war that would be remembered forever. The advisor suggests seeking Achilles' help, but Agamemnon objects, believing Achilles won't make a big difference, especially since he has no loyalty to his country, king, or even religion. The advisor thinks they can't win a battle without him, and convinces Agamemnon to seek the help of Odysseus, ruler of the Ithaca kingdom, to persuade Achilles as he has a deep respect for Odysseus. Odysseus agrees and goes to him, finding Achilles training his cousin Patroclus in combat, who greatly resembles Achilles. Odysseus asks Achilles to join the war, promising him that if he participates, his name will be immortalized in history. However, Achilles is against the idea of war, considering it a waste of soldiers' lives for the king's glory. Achilles hesitates, seeking his mother's advice. The mother, Thetis, points out that if Achilles stays, he'll marry a beautiful girl, have children, and continue his lineage, but no one will remember him. But on the other hand, if he goes to war, his name will be remembered forever. And so, Achilles decides to go to war and make his mark in history. Back in Troy, Paris, Helen, and Hector are on their way to the royal palace. Their father, King Priam, welcomes Helen, and that night Hector tells the king what happened, saying it's the will of the gods and Helen isn't at fault. Hector considers sending Helen alone on a ship to Menelaus, but Priam warns him that if he does that, Paris will follow and they'll both die. Hector argues he can't make such a crucial decision alone, and after a few days, the war bells ring throughout Troy. Hector sees a fleet of hundreds of ships with thousands of soldiers, and when Helen sees Menelaus' army, she regrets being the cause that a lot of innocent men will die for. Paris talks to Helen and suggests they escape to a distant place and live in the woods. Helen warns him that this way, he'd be abandoning his people and kingdom, but Paris answers that he is protecting his family by doing that. Helen tells Paris that Agamemnon had his eye on Troy for a long time, and he won't back off now, even if they escape. In the meantime, Troy is preparing for war, and the city gates are closed. The mighty fortress of Troy appears, and Hector and his troops gather outside the walls to defend against the enemy. Achilles' ship is at the forefront, and due to his lack of allegiance to the Greek army, he raises a black sail to show he's not under Agamemnon's command. This annoys Agamemnon, who thought Achilles had left the lead to him. Achilles, with 50 skilled warriors on his ship, arrives first on the shore, defeating the first wave of waiting Trojan soldiers with ease. Achilles seizes the temple of Apollo and orders his men to take everything. Hector sneaks into the temple alone and confronts Achilles, asking him why he's joining the war against Troy. Achilles claims it will be the greatest war in history, and that he joined to be immortalized in history. Achilles compliments Achilles for his bravery, sneaking into the temple alone. Achilles orders his men to leave him as they surrounded him during their talking, telling Hector to go back to his wife and child and enjoy his time with them, because tomorrow he won't see them again. The commander of Achilles' troops is surprised that he let Hector go, as he could have easily killed him, eliminating one of Troy's strongest warriors in the first attack. Achilles responds that they're just getting started, and the real deal is yet to come, with the princes yet to fall. After that, the rest of the fleet comes down and sets up camp along the shore. Achilles heads back to his tent, and what does he find? A fine-looking chick. His soldier buddy tells him they found her at Apollo's temple and brought her over for some entertainment. So Achilles takes off his armor, gets cozy, and when he gets closer to sniff her hair, he figures out she's some royal princess, this girl named Briseis, Hector's cousin. Achilles assures her he won't harm her, unlike Agamemnon's army. Next thing, Achilles gets summoned to the king's tent. Agamemnon knows Achilles grabbed some loot from the temple and calls him out on it. Achilles is like, if you want gold, take it. But Agamemnon ain't after gold. He calls his guards and spots Briseis, the girl they took from Achilles' tent, telling them to leave her alone unless they want to meet their makers right there. Briseis stands her ground, saying no one should die because of her. Achilles eases off and puts down his sword, and Agamemnon mocks him, saying Achilles will let the girl protect him at night. Achilles swears he'll cut Agamemnon's head off one day and leaves. Next, we see King Priam in a meeting with the throne advisors regarding the war. The army commander assures that their fortress is strong and they will surely win the war. The high priest then mentions that 2 peasants saw an eagle holding a snake, a sign that the gods were on their side. This statement infuriates Hector, who claims that the gods won't protect or benefit them. He also mentions seeing Achilles breaking the temple of the gods and chopping the head of Apollo's cestus with no consequences. King Priam tells him to respect the head priest because, thanks to his predicting the drought, they survived for the past 3 years. Paris stands up and declares that nobody will fight, suggesting a duel between him and Menelaus. The winner will take Helen and the army will withdraw. This shocks the king and Hector, as they are aware of Paris's weak combat skills. But Paris remains determined. At night, Hector walks through the palace and encounters a hidden figure. When he pursues the figure, he finds Helen, who is heading to turn herself in. Hector warns her that Menelaus will kill her. Helen tells Hector that death or remaining a slave is preferable to enduring the sight of women crying and screaming for their husbands. Hector informs Helen that Agamemnon is not here for her, but to conquer Troy and incorporate it into his kingdom. He urges her to return to Paris before the upcoming duel because he will be needing her. The next scene shows Achilles dissatisfied with the king, refusing to participate in the battle the next day. However, his younger cousin, Bartoculus, is eager for war and convinces Achilles to let him fight. Achilles acknowledges that there are many battles ahead for him to fight. The next day, Troy's army prepares for war. They gather outside the walls to face Agamemnon's army, which appears in the distance. Priam's confidence turns to fear as he witnesses the vastness of Agamemnon's forces. Paris and Hector approach Menelaus and Agamemnon to negotiate. Agamemnon rejects Paris's proposal, insisting on an invasion. Hector is distressed but suggests an alternative, a one-on-one combat between Menelaus and Paris. If Paris wins, they withdraw. If he loses, they accept the invasion. Agamemnon initially refuses, but Menelaus convinces him. Paris, visibly weakened, faces Menelaus, who easily disarms him and wounds him in the leg. Menelaus stands over Paris, preparing to deliver the final blow, but Hector intervenes and kills Menelaus to save his brother. Agamemnon witnesses his brother's death and commands his soldiers to attack. As the compact begins, Achilles and his crew witness Hector's intelligence and leadership on the battlefield. Despite the chaos, Achilles and his team join the fight from a distance. Achilles observes Hector's slick moves, intelligence, and leadership, realizing how strong and talented he is. Eventually, Hector forces Agamemnon's army to retreat, showcasing Hector's strategic brilliance and power. After the battle, Hector orders his men to collect the fallen enemies' bodies and send them back to their folks for a proper farewell. Then Agamemnon returns, burns his brother's body, and defeat is written all over his face. He discusses with Odysseus and other advisors, emphasizing the need to convince Achilles to rejoin the fight. Without him, they're losing the battle, and Agamemnon explains they require Achilles for the morale boost. The soldiers want to go back home, and seeing Achilles with them will lift their spirits. However, Agamemnon insists that Achilles won't agree to return to the fight. So Odysseus, curious about that girl Achilles took from Agamemnon, asks about her. Agamemnon said he didn't touch her and that he left her for the soldiers to mess around with. Then we see some drunk soldiers in the camp messing with Briseis like she's a toy. One dude even grabs a skewer to burn her, but Briseis fights back. Suddenly, Achilles shows up, takes the skewer, and burns the guy's neck with it. He scares off the soldiers, grabs Briseis, and takes her to his tent to clean up her wounds. Achilles asks her if anyone got too close, but she's pissed at him, smacks him, and tells him he's a killer, the greatest warrior, but he's killing innocent people. And for what? He says he didn't choose to be a warrior. It's in his blood. He asks her about her faith in the gods, especially Ares, the god of war responsible for soldiers dying in battle. She's all respectful to the gods, and he drops some wisdom on her. He spills that the gods envy humans because we're mortal, and everything seems sweeter when you know you're gonna die. She's surprised by his intelligence, thinking he's just a brute. Briseis told him that she might just forgive him after what he just stated. Later, we see her holding a dagger at night, sneaking up on Achilles and planning to kill him. But he wakes up and tells her to go ahead if she ain't scared of death. She hesitates, and he tells her he'll keep killing as long as he's a warrior. She lets go of the dagger and cries. The next day, Achilles is told to meet Odysseus. He's sitting by Briseis, admiring her beauty and innocence, and decides he won't fight again because of her. Then he goes to see Odysseus, who tries to convince him to fight for Greece. Achilles says Greece will endure and he ain't serving the king. He ain't following orders. Odysseus tells him that he doesn't need to fight for the land, but out of fear of Agamemnon. He emphasizes the need to be cautious about something or someone. Achilles laughs and asserts that he is not a servant to anyone, won't obey orders, and this time he must fight alone. Odysseus leaves, and we see Achilles' cousin, who is upset after losing hope of participating in the Trojan War. He requests to fight at least once, but Achilles refuses, ordering the soldiers to prepare the ship for departure. Back in Troy, we witness King Priam debating with Prince Hector and other advisors about the decision to wage war against Agamemnon. Priam is pleased with Hector's victory, and the advisors encourage him. Hector, however, is hesitant, mentioning that Achilles and his soldiers were not present in the last battle, indicating a disagreement with Agamemnon. Hector suggests waiting behind the walls, and when Agamemnon attacks again, they can defeat him. Still, the king rejects Hector's proposal, deciding to attack at night as a strategic move to exhaust Agamemnon's army physically and mentally on the field. Troy's army infiltrates Agamemnon's camp at night, launching a surprise attack with fireballs and arrows while the soldiers are asleep. They inflict significant casualties before dawn. As the Greek army wakes up, Achilles suddenly appears among his soldiers wearing his armor, encouraging them to face Troy's army. They encounter Hector, and a duel ensues in a circle of soldiers watching. Achilles begins attacking Hector, but Hector defends himself and manages to withstand several strikes. He gains confidence, counterattacks, and kills Achilles. The soldiers are stunned to witness their legend's death. Hector, unable to believe he killed Achilles so easily, removes the helmet, only to discover that it is Odysseus's younger cousin. He is shocked and asks Odysseus to withdraw his troops and continue the war later. The soldiers of Achilles return to their camp, and Achilles sees them wearing armor and carrying swords. He is mad at Eudoros, the commander, disobeying him and leading men to battle. Eudoros explains that he thought it was him, Achilles, who led them to battle. Achilles realizes that Bartoculus wore his armor and desperately led them to the battle seeking glory. Achilles raises his voice, calling for Bartoculus, his younger cousin. The commander informs him that Bartoculus is dead, killed by Hector. Achilles, filled with rage, beats and kicks Eudoros, and while Briseis tries to stop him, he chokes her up off the ground while pressing on Eudoros's neck, but he lets go of both of them, vowing revenge for his cousin's death. Later, he attends the funeral of Patroclus, with the whole army and Agamemnon leading the ceremony. The king says the death of the child Patroclus will be the reason for victory in this war. After that, we see Hector in the castle. He grabs his wife and shows her a secret passage, telling her that if he dies, she should gather as many Trojans as she can and escape. He insists Troy won't hold up for long, so she starts crying, pleading for him not to go and to stay with her, but Hector tells her there's no escape from war. With the next sunrise, Achilles gears up and puts on his armor. We see Briseis rolling after him, trying to talk him out of killing her cousin, desperately reminding him of his promise not to kill anymore. Ignoring her, Achilles heads towards Troy's walls. At the same time, Hector is preparing too, waiting for Achilles. Achilles arrives and calls out to Hector loudly in front of the gates, challenging him to a warrior-to-warrior duel. So Hector bids farewell to his wife, son, father, and brother as if he won't return, and descends to face Achilles. Hector steps down and tells Achilles that he thought he was fighting him back on the battlefield and that he would never kill a kid, but Achilles tells him to shut up and fight. Hector agrees but asks for a proper burial if he dies. Achilles dismisses the conditions, and the battle begins. Hector is a strong and skilled warrior, but he can't match the strength and skill of Achilles, Greece's greatest warrior. Achilles knocks Hector to the ground and his shield falls off, but Hector quickly gets up and fights with his sword and spear. However, Achilles manages to distract him, takes his spear, and thrusts it into Hector's shoulder. Hector falls to his knees, and Achilles takes out his sword, stabbing it into Hector's chest. Hector dies, and his wife witnesses the whole thing, devastated by seeing her husband die before her eyes. Achilles ties Hector's body to his war chariot and takes it back to the camp. When he enters his tent, Briseis collapses, realizing that Hector is dead. At night, Achilles is alone in his tent, and an old man sneaks in, hiding his identity. He kisses Achilles' hand and begs him not to refuse his request. He reveals himself to be the father of the young man Achilles killed Hector. Achilles is shocked that the king of Troy is on his knees begging him in his tent. The father asks to take his son's body for a proper burial. Achilles agrees and asks him to meet outside in a minute. Achilles goes out covering Hector's body and cries, asking for forgiveness. A few moments later, the king gets out, seeing his son's body awaiting. Tempted to leave, he gets surprised by seeing Briseis after thinking she was dead in the temple attack. Achilles nods, allowing her to leave with her uncle, and he hands over a necklace he ripped off Hector's neck after killing him, and he asks her for her forgiveness. She leaves, smiling as he promises them that no one shall interfere with their path back home, and that there is a 21 truce. The old man leaves with his son's body and a long-missing niece. Next day, Agamemnon is furious because of Achilles' unjustified actions, swearing to burn Troy with its people. Later on, we see Odysseus with the soldiers in the camp. There's a guy next to him carving a small horse statue, and Odysseus likes it, saying it's a gift for his son. Only then Odysseus had a brilliant idea. Following that, we see the soldiers start building a giant wooden horse, deciding to send it as a gift to Troy. On the last day of the truce, Achilles goes to apologize to his soldiers' commander, Eudoros, saying he's done fighting. He tells him he's disappointed, even though he's a loyal leader. Achilles orders him to return home, and this will be his final command. The commander appreciates his service and leadership. Later on, we see the king of Troy with his soldiers heading to the shore. When they realize that the army has disappeared, they find the wooden horse statue. They also discovered the workers who built it died due to the plague. The high priest claims it's a curse from the gods upon the Greeks. The king inquires about the enormous horse, and the advisor explains that they built it as an offering to the god Poseidon, the god of the sea, so they could return safely to their homeland. Paris suggests sinking the statue, but the leader of the priests insists on taking it and placing it in the temple of Poseidon. The king declares that he is not ready to lose another son and orders them to take the statue with them. As the king decides to take the wooden horse with them, the people of Troy celebrate the victory given to them by the gods. When night falls, Achilles, Odysseus, and a bunch of badass Greek soldiers pop out of that wooden horse. Without this sneaky move, they wouldn't have been able to break into Troy's fortress. That place was like Fort Knox or something. Those soldiers take control of the gate towers, swing them open for the rest of the army, and Achilles bolts towards the king's castle to grab Briseis. Greek soldiers are wrecking stuff, burning and tearing up the city. Fires spreading like crazy, and the king is up in his castle, watching his city burn. Meanwhile, Hector's wife, Helen, Paris, and some Trojan folks find their way through the secret tunnel Hector mentioned earlier. Paris tells Helen he should stick with his dad, who ain't leaving the city no matter what. Now picture this. The Greek army is killing people left and right, wrecking temples, statues, you name it. The king rolls up with his sword, scolding them for offing innocent priests. He's like, Troy's done, but y'all ain't got no honor. Suddenly, King Agamemnon stabs him in the back with a spear, saying everyone, including kids and ladies, is gonna burn with the city. The king gets stabbed again and bites the dust. Meanwhile, Briseis is searching for Paris, and Achilles is on the hunt for her. We see Paris with the army commander standing their ground against the Greeks trying to breach the royal castle. When they get attacked, Paris shoots arrows like he's got a vendetta, and the commander tells him to reflect. While Paris looks for Briseis, she's in the temple, begging the gods to end the war. Agamemnon shows up, spills the beans about how Achilles played him, and just as he's about to get too close, Briseis pulls out a dagger from her sleeve and stabs him in the neck. He drops dead. At the last second, Achilles storms in and wipes out the soldiers. He grabs Briseis and they leave the temple, but Paris shoots an arrow at Achilles in a rage. Briseis pleads with Paris not to kill him, but Paris isn't listening. He fires one last shot, and Achilles, trying to hold on, staggers toward him. Paris drags Briseis away, and we're left with the Greeks taking over Troy. Achilles' reign of terror comes to an end, thanks to Paris avenging his brother. In the aftermath, the remaining Trojans, led by Paris, set off, hoping to find a new home. We witnessed the funeral of Achilles, the mightiest warrior the Greeks ever saw. This dude was so strong that even death took a backseat. And that's a wrap. If you dug this video, hit like, share it, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, drop a comment telling us what movie you want to see next. Peace out.